So I'm Jamie Dwyer. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Clinical Research in the Health Sciences Center, and I direct the Utah Data Coordinating Center. I'm going to have my colleagues introduce themselves, and then the way we're going to do this, I think, is we have a couple of prepared comments and questions. We can do those. We can take questions from you all. It can be interactive. If you start to fall asleep, we will not dance, that kind of stuff. So Kelly, do you want to introduce yourself?
So I'm Kelly Thorne. I'm the Director of the Research Compliance Office here at Huntsman Cancer Institute. And I've been here at Huntsman Cancer Institute for a little over 15 years now, and I have a background in public health. I am responsible for overseeing all aspects of research compliance associated with institutional and externally sponsored clinical trials here at Huntsman Cancer Institute. And my department supports investigators in the development of interventional treatment, investigator-initiated clinical trials. And I'm happy to be here.
Hi everyone, I'm Leo. I'm a clinical pathologist at UofU. I serve as a senior medical director for our research and innovation team. So, if you guys don't know, UofU is wholly owned by University of Utah, but we're the largest nonprofit reference lab in the country. And through our innovation team, we engage in a lot of discovery work, particularly partnerships with major biopharma and medical device companies. So we have strategic relationships with companies like Eli Lilly, Danaher, Beckman Coulter, etc. So I think wherever diagnostics come into play for your sort of therapeutic development pipeline is something that we could assist in. Whether that's defining inclusion criteria, endpoints for your trials, or even some cool more research-like diagnostics to support your indications.
So Leo, maybe you could expand on that a little bit, because one of the first things that we want to talk about is how you or your office supports preclinical or clinical testing. And I think the three of us are sort of split up across a nice division, sort of laboratory science, clinical trials, trial coordination. So maybe we'll go in that order, and you want to tackle that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So within the innovation business unit at UofU, we're very involved in clinical trials in a variety of ways. We have one team called the Clinical Trials Group at UofU that basically opens up UofU's test menu, so about over 3,000 unique tests to biopharma companies for their clinical trials for testing support, right? So as I mentioned before, do you want to use any of UofU's tests? And again, we're already connected to over 2,000 health systems across the United States, and we're interfaced. So do you want to use any of our test menu for your inclusion-exclusion criteria, your safety, research endpoints, etc.? That's one way. We have a PharmaDX group at UofU that if you are so requested or required by the FDA and require a companion diagnostic for whatever therapy you're looking at, we have a team that works with biopharma partners on that. So notably, a couple of years ago, we had FDA approval of the first gene therapy companion diagnostic. And then within the innovation unit itself, we do more early stage work, especially for biopharma. So we're connected to all the large CROs in the country, so like PPD, et cetera, where biopharma companies may say, hey, we'd really like to look at a certain research use only assay. And it may even be something that the biopharma companies say, hey, can you guys develop this with us? Because we want to use it as a research endpoint in our trials, or to try to tease out novel biomarkers, or provide some submission to the FDA in terms of mechanism of action of our therapy, which FDA is oftentimes very interested in. So we kind of work across that entire spectrum.
Kelly, why don't you tackle sort of trial operations and ClinOps as a site?
Yes, so my department is responsible for assisting investigators. So when you have a new concept, let's say you've worked on the preclinical research and you're ready to move this new concept into a clinical trial, that's where my office comes into play. So we have research scientists who assist investigators with actually writing their clinical trial, as well as regulatory specialists who can work with you in doing your submissions to the FDA. So we can help you with your investigational new drug applications for the FDA, as well as any other of the regulatory submission process with the IRB and the ancillary review committees here at Huntsman Cancer Institute. Being a CCSG designated comprehensive cancer center, you also have to go through the protocol review monitoring committee, which is our scientific review committee. So we assist investigators with that process and just the back and forth communication and getting clinical trials activated and approved. We also have data managers within our department who assist investigators with a data management plan and creating the electronic data capture system, as well as the electronic case report forms. And we primarily use Advara EDC, and we have validated that in a Part 11 compliant manner to be compliant with the FDA regulations for electronic signatures and electronic data management. We also utilize REDCap. We have our own HCI instance of REDCap as well. And then our CTMS generally is Encore. A unique thing that I think we have within our department that is a little different maybe from the University of Utah is we also have clinicaltrial.gov specialists. So if you're familiar with clinicaltrials.gov, that's a website to facilitate patients knowing what clinical trials are available for them, as well as timely dissemination of research results. So we have clinicaltrials.gov specialists who can help register your clinical trial if it's an applicable clinical trial or if it meets the NIH definition of needing to be registered, and then assisting with regular maintenance and annual updates, as well as then the final results reporting as well. So it's a government system, so it's clunky, and our team is expert in assisting in that space. And then from there, when your trial is actually activated, we have monitoring and auditing and project management, and my team administrates the HCI Data and Safety Monitoring Committee. So we have an NCI-approved Data Safety Monitoring Committee that oversees all cancer-relevant investigator-initiated clinical trials here at Huntsman Cancer Institute. So we're kind of a full-service, end-to-end resource available for investigators who really want to do clinical trials.
Thanks, Kelly. And so I'll just make a couple comments about the coordinating center, the Utah DCC. So we describe the DCC as a full-service academic research organization. We have largely not been in oncology, partly because HCI is so good at it, and the HCI CTO and the other regulatory pieces that are there. We've more recently begun to explore a partnership with HCI as it relates to coordinating larger trials. So a lot of the stuff that Kelly mentioned is not totally our sweet spot. We're more in the sort of 7 to 70 sites and often global. And we also have a very strong relationship with ARUP. One of our things is we are actively participating in the innovation ecosystem here at the University of Utah and in Salt Lake City and in the state of Utah. So there are a lot of small companies that are getting started, and they will approach us and ask for connections to people. And this is the group that we often are referring people to sort of stimulate that ongoing interest. Our coordinating center, so one of the things that we like to do is as we always say, we prefer earlier collaboration. So as someone is finishing up the animal data, having us get involved to start to think through, what is the FDA going to ask? Do you need a companion diagnostic? What's the imaging modality? How are you going to define your endpoints for the phase 3? What's the regulatory strategy? If you don't have a regulatory strategist, we can refer you, and you'll actually be hearing from our regulatory strategist in a few minutes. Plamina, she's going to be, I think she's zooming in to talk a little bit about FDA. So we are also sort of a full stop, one-stop shop but is more connected to non-oncologic. You'll often hear me say I don't like to define things by what they aren't. There's cancer and then there's other, but that's actually a good split. And we mostly do other, but we're really looking forward to partnering with HCI on some of these bigger projects. Maybe I'll ask, maybe we should go back to Leo. So one of the questions is, within the U and HCI, what capabilities do you see as most critical for advancing oncology drug development? Things like animal models, imaging, farm tox, translational testing. Most critical for advancing oncology.
Yeah, so again, I'm more on the non-oncology side of ARUP. We have our surgical pathologist based here at Huntsman, but we're one department, we work very closely together. I think on advancing oncology side, I think it would be preclinical. First, as Jane was mentioning, your animal models and sort of what sort of analytes, again, more towards laboratory medicine you're collecting to show efficacy, toxicity, safety, where available. Our surgical pathologists do a lot of work with Huntsman investigators. So whether that's patient-derived xenograft models, immunohistochemistry, like tissue biopsies or immunohistochemistry. So I think there's on the preclinical side, there's a lot of support with our sort of colleagues in surgical pathology, and again, a lot of their work, the bulk of the work really is, and their offices are here in Huntsman, is to support Huntsman Cancer Center patients. And then if you move more towards the clinical side, then I think it's the question of, okay, do you need companion diagnostics, or do you need some sort of diagnostics to sort of identify the cohort of patients that will respond to your therapy? And then the pharmaceutical side, we've worked with multiple companies over the past who have targeted oncology therapies, and then they are either trying to figure out, should they have a companion diagnostic or should they not? And there's sort of pros and cons to go either way, right? Like if you have a companion diagnostic, you sort of limit the patient population that you may be able to treat initially, but you may be able to design a smaller trial. You may have higher probability of seeing success in your endpoints that you want, because again, you're defining a cohort of patients that you think will respond. So I think that's sort of like where we are in terms of the area team, and then also our department of pathology and our a lot of our pathologists here that do cancer patient care at Huntsman.
Well, I don't know that I could say one phase is more important than the next phase, but they all inform one another, right? So you have your scientific discovery and development, which then leads into hopefully being able to do animal preclinical testing, where you're identifying safe doses and toxicities are being established. And then from there, being able to move into human research clinical trials, it would be pretty amazing. So all of that data is then what you would be utilizing as far as what you would need in a new drug application, animal or human or whatnot, to be able to submit that with the FDA. So that's kind of my opinion, just because I'm primarily working in clinical trials. So.
No, I think it's a good point. And so one of the ideas embedded here is that, I think we have a full service ecosystem. It's just knowing how to access each of the things across each step or each stage. And that's kind of, I think, part of why we're having this conversation today. When I think about it from the perspective of someone who has done it with companies and started companies and exited companies and things like that, that's a little bit the way I think about it. You have to start with the end in mind. So literally, like I will begin as we're evaluating whether or not to file an IND, you have to start to think about like what's the phase 3 endpoint going to look like, and what's table 1 look like in the New England Journal paper, because that is going to determine how people learn about this molecule. And then you back up from there. That life though, that entrepreneurial space is, I call it, it's very quantum. In the sense that everything is sort of vibrating simultaneously and there's no final answer on anything ever. Because everything always has to be reconsidered continuously. So I think the sample size is 200. Well, we found out from the FDA that that's not going to work, so now it's 250. So you have to just constantly be thinking about that. So knowing all of these resources that I think we're talking about here, and just how to engage with them is really one of the first steps in order to be able to successfully commercialize, successfully spin something out. And also even ask and answer the question, do I want to do this or do I want to pass it off to a team that wants to do this? Like, not all of us want to do this, and that is, not only is it okay, it can also be right. It needs to be right for your career. It needs to be right for your stage of life. And some people want to just go out and do, and other people want to say, I invented this and I turned it over and they did a great job with it. One of the specific questions was about capabilities as most critical for advancing oncology drug development. And there's a couple of ideas here about imaging, toxicology, and translational testing. I mean, I think I would love to hear what you all think, but I personally think that staying abreast inside the innovation ecosystem here at Utah of new developments, particularly ways to ingest imaging, ways to propose, I don't even want to say it, but an AI analysis of your imaging. That is super hot right now, and people have excess money in their funding streams to be able to figure out how to do that. So, some of this is grant personship and trying to figure out, is this the right way to do this? Some of it is also following the smart money. Where are people putting money into, and do we want to align on that? It does a little bit remind me of 2020 when everybody said, well, now our pizza chain is on the blockchain. And that was really dumb because that didn't actually create value for those companies. So I think we have to be careful about that as it relates to AI. But imaging AI, diagnostics and AI pathology, all of this is super hot right now. And so I sort of see an opportunity for additional funding if it's aligned with some of these either national research priorities or where the money is going. I don't know, Leo, Kelly, if you guys have any comments about that.
Yeah, I think you guys will probably get more details in terms of the different funding sources that are available to you at the University of Utah. But speaking on the diagnostic side of, and again, this is focused on oncology, but obviously area people are very focused on diagnostics. So if either as part of your therapeutic discovery or you have another discovery that could be used for diagnostics, I think come talk to Area EP. We do have internal grant funding mechanisms like a Perkins grant where we're actively looking to better engage the community. So, work with investigators that are not just in our department, but in the university, either at the large or at Huntsman. So I just, put a plug in there if you guys see any need for specialized diagnostics or an application of your invention that could be used for diagnostics, come talk to us.
Oh, you should keep it, because I don't think that one works.
Yeah, no, it keeps on ticking. I would just say with the development of clinical trials, and if you have a new drug that you're trying to bring to market, I would say working closely with the FDA. They have numerous pre-IND type meetings that you can hold with the FDA where I think you're taking their advice and working towards what they're recommending earlier on is going to help get your drug to market sooner. What we've seen is the FDA review process is a 30-day review. So you submit your IND, they have 30 days to review. They almost always get back to you right on that 30-day mark. And then from there, if they have any questions, they're only going to give you 24 to 48 hours to respond. And if you need to do more preclinical research, that's not going to happen in 24 to 48 hours. And so then you're going to find yourself in a clinical hold with the FDA. And that's not always the best way to start out with the FDA. So that would just be something that I would suggest and something that we've seen in our office.
I'm just going to make a couple of additional comments on that early FDA review process. So our group in the DCC also does a fair amount of this work. We partner with small companies and investigators as they are approaching FDA. There's a whole process around how those questions get structured, how you get the answers to the kinds of things you're thinking about without giving away company secrets or trade secrets or whatever it is. As I call it, reading the tea leaves on what the agency says back to you is a really important piece of that. I think it's really important to remember that the FDA is principally a safety organization. It is not an efficacy organization. They are required by law that the studies demonstrate efficacy, but they exist because of safety. And so one of the corollaries of that is the FDA will let you do any study so long as they think it's safe. What that means is they will let you spend your money on any study so long as they think it's safe. It can be a stupid study and they don't care. And so you really, many of the times when you get something back from the FDA, they're called recommendations, but they're not. They're mandates. Because you will get told 5 years from now in your advisory committee, we told you that you should have considered that and you didn't. So knowing that you're making a decision today in an animal model that is going to affect approvability of your compound 5 years from now is part of the reason why I think this is a quantum problem. Like you have to be thinking about the end game before you even know what necessarily the indication is going to be. And it can feel overwhelmingly impossible. And I'll put a plug in for the 30-day window, like they come on the last day and you have 24 hours and nobody wants to get a clinical hold from the agency. So You need to know that you have done all of the preclinical work necessary before you file your IND. So I think the next question is around a deep dive on some of the resources. So I think maybe Leo, you could start because you're probably the most preclinical, or ARUP, not you, but ARUP is the most preclinical. So what resources are available at each stage and how can researchers best leverage them? And then we'll sort of go from preclinical to clinical trials to trial coordination.
So on the preclinical side, again, we're pathologists, so animal studies are very important, right? So if you need tissue histology or labs, for your animal models, I think we work with investigators and companies that do that. I'd just like to echo that, FDA, my first job was as a first employee of a biotech startup company and went through the whole, fundraising, IND, FDA process, and, safety is the what that can kill your program, right? So I think, getting that nailed down, getting the pre-subs, getting from them everything so that by the time your IND goes in, you feel pretty confident that you have a path forward, you can respond to anything that has a really short turnaround is important. And then the efficacy thing, again, I'm kind of on my soapbox, it's kind of interesting, right? But that's a dialogue that you define with the agency, but they will approve things with very limited efficacy as long as there's no patient safety signal there, right? So something to think about. So in terms of services, right? So again, if you guys need pathology or diagnostic support for animal models, blood markers, other tissue-based markers, fluid markers, I think come talk to us. And then also when you, as James mentioned, as you think further on, ARUP is starting to look at novel ways to support biopharma in terms of, particularly right now, we have a very strong interest in a partnership with a company called TASO that does remote blood collections. So if you're thinking about what the safety look like and what the safety monitoring look like, we'd be happy to talk to you about that as well in terms of novel ways to do it.
I previously shared a lot of the experiences and what my office has to offer. Essentially, we have various expertise in all the various areas of clinical trials. So if you've done your preclinical testing, you either have a drug or you have a partner with a drug, and you want to get it off the ground in a clinical trial, know that we have the expertise to get you moving forward so that it's not all a burden on you. We have protocol writers, regulatory specialists, data monitoring, audits, safety, all the stuff.
Leo's going to make another comment.
Yeah, I just want to add into, we do work closely with companies, and especially this is sort of the oncology talk. And so, I work with partners where in terms of the preclinical side, they say, hey, we think we've identified a compound that targets XYZ cancer, right? And so what we can do, and we work with customers, is that we do have a biobank, both in terms of human tissues, right? That we've been for the last 20 years at ARUP, and we can go through kind of our files and we can look and we can pull up cases and say, okay, in this subset of, certain cancer patients with this sort of confirmed diagnosis, if this is the market you're targeting, we can sort of pull tissue blocks and we can do immunohistochemistry and stuff like that and tell you okay, out of the past 2,000 triple negative breast cancer patients, X number of them express the market that you're potentially thinking about in terms of moving your programs forward. So that's another thing that pathology offers is that we do have a pretty large biobanks that we can go back to help improve your clinical programs.
And the last thing I'll add is that the DCC really likes to employ sort of the principles of coordination science on the conduct of very large multi-center and multi-site research. It's bigger than just clinical trials, although mostly what we're talking about here is clinical trials, but we do all sorts of other things that are trials and trials adjacent that are also even adjacent to health, sort of the impact of climate on car crashes, that is a health thing, but it is something that our group is really good at. So from our perspective, the kinds of resources that we have are very similar to what HCI offers, just in a different kind of disease area, so to speak. And like I said, we want to continue to explore ways that we can offer that kind of support, especially to larger oncology companies where maybe HCI hasn't done this before but wants to explore doing it. So that's really where our conversations are right now around utilizing our platform and our backbone to operationalize coordination of much larger studies. We've got about 6 minutes, so we're gonna maybe begin to wrap up. One of the questions is around misconceptions. And so like, what are the misconceptions, or what are the things that maybe you wish people knew up front? And I'll start. I think it's high time for us to reprogram academic brains and really begin to think about all of this from the angle of great science irrespective of funding source. Like, we have seen, everybody, we don't even have to talk about it, like the elephant room. The elephant in the room is the collapse of federal funding and indirects and, all of that kind of stuff. So thinking about how you take your science and move it forward using all available methods is really important. The other thing is that one of the biggest misconceptions people had about the DCC is that it exists to only service one group. And I think that is kind of the point of everything we're talking about today. One of the mottos in the DCC is, yes, we'd like to explore that. By when? And we call that yes, by when. No is never the default. The answer is always yes, by when. When do we need to do that? How would we do that? What would that look like? How is it beneficial to everybody, including the patient? Those are the kinds of things that I kind of wish we did a better job of making everybody know was what the DCC was about. So that, we're not here to write your grant for you. Nobody's going to write your grant, but not even AI. But what we want to do is to harness the power of collaboration to move science forward. So maybe misconceptions and things you wish people knew.
I would agree with you wholeheartedly on collaboration and communication is 100% key in getting studies moving forward. Dr. Sherry Holman's here, and I was going to just share an example of the clinical trial that she was able to activate. So she, based upon her preclinical research that she was doing in her lab, she worked closely with Dr. Howard Colvin as a clinical trialist and was able to get the research that she was doing into a clinical trial where Dr. Coleman is the lead PI, utilizing defactinib, avutometinib, and with or without encorafenib in patients with metastatic melanoma brain metastases. And once she was able to make that partnership, finding funding, that's always a struggle too. So now you have this amazing idea about how you get it off the ground. And Huntsman Cancer Institute, HCI senior leadership is really dedicated to the research that we do here. We have a lot of various ways of obtaining funding. So Center for Investigational Therapeutics is one way of funding and what this clinical trial received. And it's a grant review that happens twice a year, but also the disease centers and the clinical trial research groups have available funds and grants that can be applied, as well as other areas institutionally. So with that, we got the financial viability to get this study off the ground, but we needed to partner with an external drug company. So we were able to work with Veristem Oncology and get the study medications supplied for these patients. And now that we've had it open a couple of years, we're already seeing in one of the study arms some preliminary responses, which is really exciting for this aggressive, horrible cancer. So what I'm trying to get to there is this clinical trial moved forward quickly because of the time and communication that we had with everybody and the close collaboration between both preclinical research and our clinical trialists, and working closely with my department.
In terms of misconceptions, I don't know if I have any strong ones, but I would say that one thing that, being in academia, but I've also worked in industry previously, is that, don't view industry as like the dark side. Like, I think that engaging industry partners, finding those strategic relationships early on can be extremely helpful. And so, I think as the ecosystem, the innovation ecosystem at Utah is being built, and we do have these strategic partnerships with biopharma and medical device manufacturers, I think leveraging those in terms of interest in getting input on your programs, support for programs, and then actually these are the routes that will eventually be partnerships or acquisitions if your technology turns out to be successful. So I think don't shy away from industry. Just be careful that you have the intellectual property, the confidentiality agreements, all these kind of things in place before you go out and have some serious discussions with them.
So we have 1 minute left. So to close, how to reach you?
Just contact me directly. But if you need a general email address, our email address is protocolmanagement@hci.utah.edu. And we also have a Pulse now SharePoint website. So if you look for investigator initiative trial resources, it should pop up my department.
Yeah, so same thing for me. You can contact me directly by email. Hopefully that's been shared, but also the innovation team at RUP on our main external facing website. There's a link for innovation where you can just submit a query saying, hey, we're interested in working with the innovation team at RUP on XYZ project. And then we sort of have a vetting process and we'll get back to you, especially if it's coming from internal at the U, Huntsman, et cetera.
And then similar for the DCC, we're just dcc@utah.edu. And I will put a plug in that there is a process that's being undertaken right now by TLO to build a front-facing front door for all sorts of this kind of stuff, so that ultimately that would probably be the best place to put the query because it will be tracked, routed, and actioned from there. So I think we're going to pause here right on time. We'll step away and the next speaker will be up. Thank you, guys.